Welcome, dear listeners, to Whispers in the Dark, where shadows tell stories and the night breathes secrets. I'm your guide through the unknown, your storyteller in the silence, weaving tales that will haunt your thoughts long after the last word fades. Here we embrace the eerie, the unsettling, the stories that lurk just beyond the edge of the firelight. So settle in, dim the lights, and listen closely. The darkness has something to say. So let's begin this eerie tale, The Backseat Shadow. The rain fell in heavy sheets, drumming against the windshield of Claire Mitchell's Range Rover as she navigated the winding back roads home. The hospital shift had drained her, leaving her eyelids heavy and her reflexes dulled. Her wipers slashed frantically across the glass, struggling to keep up with the storm. The dark road ahead stretched endlessly, lined with trees that swayed and groaned in the wind. The rhythmic patter of rain against the car created a hypnotic lull, her exhaustion threatening to pull her under. She barely saw the girl, a flash of red, a small, pale face illuminated in her headlights. Then, a sickening thud. The sound reverberated through the car, a deep, unnatural impact that sent a jolt up Claire's arms as she gripped the steering wheel. Her heart lurched into her throat as she slammed on the brakes. Tires screeched against wet pavement, the car fishtailing before coming to a jarring halt. For a moment, there was silence. Only the distant rumble of thunder and the rapid drumming of rain on the bonnet. Claire sat frozen, her pulse hammering so loudly in her ears that it drowned out her own frantic breaths. A child. Oh, God. She hit a child. Shaking, Claire fumbled with the door handle, her fingers numb and trembling. She stumbled into the storm, the wind howling through the trees, whipping her soaked hair across her face. Her stomach twisted as she stepped forward, her shoes splashing in a growing puddle of water mixed with something darker. There she was, a little girl, no older than 7, sprawled lifeless on the road. Her bright red raincoat was crumpled around her small frame, her tiny hands limp at her sides. Claire's throat clenched as she dropped to her knees, pressing trembling fingers to the child's wrist. No pulse. She shook the girl gently, her hands slick with rain and something warm. The little girl's wide, glassy eyes stared up at the sky, unblinking. The rain pooled in them, making them appear eerily alive. Claire's mind screamed at her to do something. CPR, call for help. But she was frozen, locked in a waking nightmare. Her hands hovered uselessly over the girl's chest before she finally found the strength to reach into her pocket for her phone. With shaking fingers, she dialed 999.
Ambulance. What's your emergency?
Panicking, she replies, I hit a little girl. She's not moving. There's so much blood. The dispatcher's voice was calm, asking for her location. But Claire barely heard it. Her pulse roared in her ears, her vision swimming with plummet. The rain was deafening, drumming against her skull, drowning out the world. Then, a sound. A faint giggle carried through the rain. Claire's breath hitched. She whipped her head around, eyes darting through the darkness. No one was there, only the trees, their skeletal branches swaying ominously in the storm. A trick of the wind, she told herself, her mind playing cruel tricks. But as she turned back to the girl, The body was gone. A strangled gasp escaped her lips as she scrambled back, her pulse hammering. The girl had been right there, lifeless beneath her hands. But now, only the dark, rain-slicked pavement remained, the pool of blood washing away in the storm. Claire's breath came in rapid, panicked gasps. She turned in circles, scanning the road, the trees, the shadows. Another giggle, closer this time. Then, another, soft, chilling, right behind her. Claire spun around, her scream swallowed by the storm. The days following the accident were suffocating. Claire barely remembered the questions from the police, the sympathetic glances from her co-workers, or even the funeral announcement in the local paper. The official report called it an accident. No negligence, no charges. But none of that mattered. The weight of what had happened coiled inside her chest like a living thing, tightening, squeezing, whispering in her ear when the world was quiet. Then, the strange things began. The first night after the accident, Claire woke to the sound of rain tapping against her bedroom window. But there was no storm. She sat up, heart hammering, and listened. The rhythmic pattering grew louder, almost as if someone small, was pacing outside. She forced herself to look. A tiny set of wet footprints led from the sidewalk to her front door. The prints stopped there. No signs of retreating steps, as if the visitor had entered. Claire's stomach clenched. She squeezed her eyes shut, whispering that it wasn't real, just her mind playing cruel tricks. When she looked again, the footprints were gone, but the feeling of being watched never left. At work, she heard it, soft giggles echoing through the hospital halls when no children were around. The smell of damp earth clung to her scrubs, no matter how many times she washed them. The fluorescent lights flickered and dimmed when she walked beneath them. Then, the shadows started shifting. One night, she stayed late charting patient notes. The hospital was quiet, the kind of eerie silence that made her skin prickle. As she rubbed her tired eyes, she caught movement in the reflection of the computer screen. A small figure standing in the doorway behind her. Her blood turned to ice. Slowly, she turned. The hallway was empty. But just as she exhaled a shaky breath, the lights flickered. The computer screen glitched, static crackling through the speakers. That's when she felt it. A soft child's hand touched her face. Claire shoved her chair back, so hard it toppled over. Her pulse thundered as she spun in circles, searching for the source of the touch. But she was alone. Trembling, she grabbed her bag and fled to her car. She needed to leave, needed to get home, get sleep, get away from this. She slammed the car door shut, exhaling sharply. Just a few deep breaths. She turned the key in the ignition, glancing in the rearview mirror, and froze. A small figure in a red raincoat sat in the back seat, wide eyes meeting hers through the glass. The engine roared to life just as the giggle came. Low, echoing, unnatural, Claire screamed. Claire tried to convince herself that it was nothing. Hallucinations, sleep deprivation, stress from the crash. But the presence in the back seat never left, no matter how many times she told herself it would go away. Each time she got behind the wheel, the weight of unseen eyes seemed to press down on her. The air would grow frigid, her breath visible in the rearview mirror. The stench of damp earth and decay filling her nostrils, choking her as she gasped for air. At first, it was subtle, faint whispers that seemed to come from the shadows of her peripheral vision, low and cold, like the breath of something that had long been buried. The voice was never quite clear, but it always carried a weight of accusation. It would whisper, "You should have stopped," curling around her like a vine, suffocating her every thought. She tried to ignore it. She thought if she just kept driving, just kept moving forward, it would stop. But every night, the giggling grew louder, more erratic, more chilling. And every time Claire closed her eyes, it felt like the giggles were right there, beneath her skin, twisting with malevolent glee. The faint echo of her tires hitting the asphalt, the faint rustle of leaves, everything seemed to mock her. There was no escape. One night, as she passed the crash site again, her breath caught in her throat. The flash of red in the rearview mirror, so bright against the dark backdrop of the trees, was enough to send her pulse into overdrive. Her grip tightened on the steering wheel. The giggles, growing louder, more insistent, came from behind her, but this time the sound was different. It wasn't playful anymore. It was hollow, cruel, like a mocking chant. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear her vision. The radio cut to static, crackling through the speakers like the dying gasp of some unseen thing. The car seemed to shift, veering slightly to the left, and Claire fought with the wheel, trying to regain control. Her heart slammed in her chest. But then, there, in the mirror, she saw her. Madeline, the girl from the accident. Her red raincoat was now torn, the fabric frayed and soaked with something dark and sickly. The girl's once pale face was twisted, grotesque, eyes wide and unblinking. Her lips pulled back into a grin, so twisted that it seemed to stretch her face beyond the realm of normal human expression. The car swerved violently. Claire gasped, her foot slamming against the brake as the world around her spun. The brakes screeched, but they couldn't hold the car steady. She could hear the girl's voice now, not from behind her, but from all around her, swirling in the air like a chorus of ghosts. The girl whispered in a ghostly voice.
"Stop!"
The voice was so sweet, so innocent, that it should have been comforting. But it wasn't. It was a lullaby laced with malice, a soft whisper promising that something worse was to come. The girl's laugh, it wasn't a giggle anymore. It was a high-pitched cackle, like broken glass scraping across metal. The noise scraped through her skull, carving deep grooves into her sanity. Claire slammed her eyes shut. She didn't want to look anymore. She couldn't, but when she opened them again, the girl was still there, in the back seat. Claire gasped. No, no. The car swerved again, the tires screeching as she slammed the wheel to the left, the headlights of another car blinding her for a split second. The figure in the back seat didn't move. It just stared. But the girl's eyes, wide and black, seemed to follow her, every twitch, every nervous shift in her body. The girl's voice came again, this time stronger, more demanding, more ghostly.
"You should have stopped for me. You just sucked for me."
Her vision blurred. The rain began to pour harder, making everything around her even more surreal. The windshield wipers couldn't keep up. She pressed her foot harder against the pedal, desperate to outrun the madness creeping up behind her, but it was futile. The presence in the back seat was there, real, tangible, like an ice-cold hand crawling up her spine. The lights flickered once, twice, 3 times, before the car jerked violently to the side. Claire's breath caught in her throat. as the world around her seemed to distort. The trees were no longer trees. They were dark shapes, twisting, reaching out with skeletal fingers. The road had become a funnel, spiraling downward into something dark and endless. The girl's voice whispered again,
"You will never escape."
This time in a voice that was no longer innocent, but full of ancient rage. The whisper melted into her bones. Claire's heart hammered in her chest as she struggled to breathe. Her hands, slick with sweat, slipped off the steering wheel. The car lurched, the tires fighting for traction against the wet road. And suddenly, she couldn't hear the rain anymore. The world had gone silent, thick and oppressive. Everything went dark. When Claire opened her eyes, she was no longer in the car. It was cold, too cold. The air was thick, pressing against her skin like a heavy blanket. She couldn't move. Her body felt numb, lifeless. The smell of damp earth was suffocating, overpowering, making her stomach churn. But she couldn't scream. Her throat was dry, her lips cracked, as if she hadn't spoken in days. The little girl, Madeleine, was standing in front of her, her face no longer twisted, but serene. A strange, chilling calmness radiated from her. The girl's smile was small, almost sad, but there was something in her eyes, something cold, dead, and unforgiving.
Why didn't you stop for me?
Madeleine asked softly, her voice echoing around the dark, suffocating space. Claire wanted to scream, wanted to run, but there was no way out, no escape, no breath of fresh air. Only the girl, only the unyielding, hollow eyes that had seen too much, that knew her guilt, her fear, her desperate need for atonement. The girl's hand reached out slowly, her fingers brushing against Claire's cheek, sending a shock of ice through her bones.
"Now you're all mine."
She whispered. Suddenly, the world around her went black. The silence was deafening. The presence, Madeleine, was gone. The cold lingered, but it was empty now, hollow. Claire was alone, and then she saw it. The road, her car, the accident, the red coat. It was happening again. She couldn't move, she couldn't scream, and in that moment, Claire realized she had never escaped. Days had passed since the night she saw Madeleine in the back seat, but Claire's mind had not recovered. If anything, it had fractured further. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the girl's twisted smile, heard the whisper of her voice, that haunting question, "Why didn't you stop?" It was no longer just a voice in her head. It was a presence, a shadow that clung to her every waking moment. And it wasn't just confined to the car anymore. The whispers had started to follow her. She would hear them as she walked down the hall at work, faint murmurs in the quiet corners, too soft to be real, but unmistakable nonetheless. A rustle of clothing, a shift in the air. She'd turn and find no one there. But it never stopped. It never went away. That night, after another long, sleepless shift, Claire drove home in a fog. The weight of exhaustion pressed down on her like a physical force. Her vision blurred with every mile, and the lines of the road twisted and melted, like they were made of liquid. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly, her knuckles ached. But it wasn't enough to stop the gnawing sensation, the feeling that someone was watching her, waiting. She dared not glance at the rearview mirror. She knew what she would see. Still, The urge to look was undeniable. Slowly, she turned her head, feeling the weight of her own terror pressing against her chest. Nothing. The back seat was empty, as it had been countless times before, but her mind was no longer convinced. She could still feel her. The girl was there. She had to be. A flicker of motion in the corner of her vision sent her heart racing. Claire's breath hitched, and she turned her head, faster this time. But once again, the back seat was empty. Her heart slammed in her chest as she exhaled in relief, only for it to catch in her throat when she caught a glimpse of something in the reflection of the side mirror. The girl's red coat, the edges of it rippling in the rearview mirror, a shadow trailing behind her. The voice came again, this time not from the back seat, but from the depths of her mind. It was everywhere now, inside her, around her, a constant, invasive presence. The voice was soft, almost sweet, but it was laced with something darker, something more malevolent.
You should have stopped for me. Now you'll never escape.
Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, her fingers ached, but no matter how hard she tried to control the car, it felt as though the road was leading her somewhere else, somewhere she couldn't turn back from. Then she saw it, the flash of red too vivid to ignore. It was at the side of the road, the small figure standing there, waiting for her. The girl in the red coat. Claire slammed on the brakes, her heart lurching. Her foot shook against the pedal as the tires screamed against the wet pavement. The car swerved, fishtailing dangerously. She could feel the grip of something invisible pulling her in different directions. She fought to regain control, but it was like the car was no longer her own. The wheels spun on its own, the engine roared like a living beast, and all she could hear was the echo of Madeline's laughter. The world blurred around her, the dark trees blurring into grotesque shapes. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. The air was thick with the scent of decay, the cold dampness clinging to her skin, seeping into her bones. The brakes gave out. Claire's stomach dropped as the car plummeted forward, the tires screeching helplessly as they met the slick, rain-slicked road. In the split second before impact, she saw the girl again, standing at the edge of the road, her face blank, her eyes wide and empty.
You should have stopped for me. You just sucked for me.
Madeline's voice whispered in her ear. The world went dark. When Claire opened her eyes again, the car was still moving, but now it was no longer on the road. The pavement was gone. The trees had disappeared. There was only an endless black void, a hollow silence so thick it felt like it was pressing in on her from all sides. The car floated, no longer bound to the earth, to reality. She could still feel the seat beneath her, but it was as if gravity no longer existed. The rain had stopped. The storm was gone. But she wasn't alone. The back seat was there. It was always there. Claire turned slowly, her breath catching in her throat as she saw Madeline, still dressed in her red coat, sitting in the back seat, her small hands folded neatly in her lap. The little girl's eyes were wide, unblinking, her face as cold and empty as the abyss surrounding them. She smiled, but it wasn't the innocent smile Claire remembered from the first time they'd met. It was a smile full of malice, stretching her face beyond the limits of what was natural.
You can't escape me.
Madeline whispered. Her voice was different now, lower, raspier, as if it had been pulled from somewhere dark.
I will never let you go. You belong to me.
Claire's blood ran cold, her heart pounded, but she couldn't move. The darkness around them was consuming, pressing in on her, suffocating her. She could hear the faint echoes of the giggling again, but this time it wasn't playful, it wasn't innocent. It was the sound of something wrong, something unnatural. Claire opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Her throat was dry, cracked. Madeline tilted her head, as if in amusement.
You want to get away, didn't you?
She asked softly. Her voice was a whisper that slithered into Claire's ears, creeping under her skin, burrowing deep into her mind.
You thought you could outrun me?
The car lurched, the engine growling beneath her, pulling them further into the abyss. Claire whispered, "No," her voice breaking, her body trembling. But it was too late. The back seat was no longer just a place for shadows. It was a prison, and Claire was trapped inside it, trapped inside her own guilt, her own terror. She could still hear the whispers of the girl, the voice that was always there, haunting her, following her, until the world around her fractured completely. Claire closed her eyes, the whispers louder now, suffocating, drowning out every last thought. The car was spinning, spinning, and she couldn't stop it. She couldn't escape. When Claire opened her eyes again, the world was still dark. The silence was deafening, the air thick with the stench of decay. And in the back seat, Madeline was waiting, always waiting. The darkness pressed in on Claire from all sides, suffocating, oppressive, relentless. She could no longer distinguish between waking and sleeping, between the harsh reality of the world and the suffocating nightmare that had become her existence. It was as if the world itself had turned against her. Every step, every breath, a reminder of the little girl whose life she had taken, whose death she had caused. The haunting had become an inescapable cage, and the bars were made of her own guilt. The whispers had grown louder. Now they followed her everywhere, like an invisible weight on her chest, always just behind her, always in her ear. Every corner of her apartment, every hallway in the hospital, every street she drove down, Madeline's voice was there, a constant presence, a chilling reminder that she could never escape what she had done. Her eyes were heavy, and her movements were slow, sluggish, as though she were moving through a thick fog. She hadn't slept properly in days. The dark circles under her eyes had deepened, her skin pale and hollow. Her mind was fraying at the edges. Tonight, as she drove home through the empty streets, the weight of exhaustion threatened to pull her under. The headlights of her car sliced through the rain, illuminating the road ahead in sharp, fleeting flashes. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, but even that felt distant, as if she were no longer truly in control of her own body. Every few seconds, her gaze would flicker to the rearview mirror, and she would catch sight of the red coat. It was always there. Madeline, her heart would race, but she couldn't look away. The girl's eyes, dark, empty, wide, and hollow, stared back at her from the reflection. Claire's breath quickened, her pulse pounding in her ears, drowning out the soft murmur of the rain and the hum of the engine. The haunting giggles had returned, soft at first, like distant chimes, but they were growing louder, closer, more insistent. They echoed in Claire's mind, a constant reminder of her failure. She had to stop. She had to turn the car around. But the road felt endless, stretching on and on, looping in on itself, as if it had no end, no exit. It was all leading her back to the same place, the place where it had all started, the place where Madeline had died. And then, the voice, that sweet, cold voice.
Why didn't you start for me?
The car jerked, almost as if it were responding to the voice. She slammed on the brakes, her heart leaping into her throat, her body slamming forward into the seatbelt. The car swerved, tires screeching against the wet pavement as it slid out of control. But the road didn't end. It didn't stop. It was endless. No matter how much she tried to turn the wheel, to regain control, the car was moving of its own accord.
You should have stopped for me. You just sucked for me.
The voice whispered again, this time so close, it felt like the words were being breathed directly into her ear. Claire's skin crawled. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay, the scent of something rotten, something dead. Claire gasped. No, 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 her fingers gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She was choking on the fear, her pulse roaring in her ears, drowning out everything else. She turned the wheel violently, but it didn't matter. The road curved in on itself, looping back toward the darkened woods where the accident had happened. The trees loomed, twisted and skeletal, like gnarled fingers reaching out to grab her.
You didn't stop. Now I will make you.
The car lurched forward, the headlights flickering. The engine sputtered, then roared back to life with an unnatural growl. Claire's breath caught as she glanced in the rearview mirror. Again, the back seat was no longer empty. Madeline sat there, her tiny body curled up in the seat, her face pressed against the glass. Her eyes were wide and empty, staring at Claire with an intensity that made her blood run cold. The girl's lips parted in a twisted smile, showing teeth that were too sharp, too jagged. And then she giggled. It was a sound that rattled Claire's bones, that twisted her insides into knots. Claire's hands were shaking, her vision narrowing, tunnel-like. Her mind was slipping. The guilt, the fear, the suffocating terror, it all merged together. A whirlwind of panic and despair that she couldn't escape. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She couldn't stop the car, and she couldn't stop the voice. She couldn't stop Madeline. The giggles intensified, a shrill, maddening sound that filled her skull, rattling her brain. Claire screamed, her voice raw and desperate, but it didn't matter. No one would hear her. No one could save her. Then, everything went still. The car was still moving, but it wasn't on the road anymore. The world around her was pitch black, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. No sound, no rain, no wind, just silence. A suffocating, oppressive silence. Claire's hands slipped from the steering wheel as the car drifted, floating through the void, the engine still growling beneath her. She felt herself fading. Her eyes grew heavy, and her body felt weightless, as if the very essence of her being was being pulled away. And then, the whisper again.
I will never let you go. You belong to me.
Madeline's face was suddenly there, so close that Claire could see every detail. The sharpness of her smile, the glint in her dead eyes, the twisted, cruel expression that sent a shudder through Claire's entire body. The girl's lips parted once more, and a single word escaped.
Stop!
Claire's body jerked in the seat. Her breath hitched in her chest, but it was too late. The world exploded in a blinding flash of light, a deafening crash of sound. The car veered off the road, crashing through a fence, slamming into the cold earth below. Metal crunched, glass shattered, and Claire's world went dark. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no light, no pain. Just cold, suffocating darkness. And then, the giggle. Soft at first, but growing louder. Claire couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Her body was still, cold and lifeless. The car had stopped, but the haunting hadn't. The whispers, the giggles, they were there, always there. As if Madeleine had never left. And Claire realized, in that final moment before her mind slipped away completely, that it was never over. The guilt would never stop. The haunting would never stop. She would never escape. She was stuck, trapped in the car, forever. Madeleine had won. Thank you for listening to Whispers in the Dark. If you'd like to support the show, head over to our Patreon, where you can sign up to one of 3 different tiers. Or, if you'd prefer to make a one-off contribution, maybe you'd like to buy me a coffee. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and YouTube to stay up to date with new episodes, behind-the-scenes content, and more chilling tales. Links are in the bio. And remember, you've heard the whispers, but some doors, once opened, never truly close. If you feel something watching tonight, don't look back. We'll see you next time, if the dark lets you go.